Okay, so it's 2:30. I'm gonna go ahead and start. I may sound like a robot today. Depends on how fast we get through this first portion of stuff because um, you guys can see in the live stream that I've got way too many heavy programs open, and my computer's definitely not happy with having Illustrator and Substance Painter and OBS and Unity and streaming as well as recording and all that jazz going on. So, bear with me. If you've got to ask me, like, if things go a little bit weird, let me know. Before we start actual class stuff, I wanted to let you guys know that there's a bunch of emails that you have in your school email that you should probably take a look at. One of them is this one that I have up right now on the screen, which is about meeting with the librarians and the writing tutors all in one place. This doesn't so much go for this class because you're not, writing things. Um, but, well, I mean, you are writing something. You do have to do a postmortem, but you're not actually having to, like, find resources and things like that. However, if you're taking another class that is research heavy or is requiring you to write a lot, this is a great place to be to get all the help in one place. I do, however, suggest going to the writing tutors in general. Um, whether that be the English writing tutors who pretty much only help with English papers, or the WAC lab tutors who will help with anything, including game stuff. Um, if you're trying to write a pitch or something and you're like, I need somebody to proofread this, they're the people to go. Most of them are gamers, so they like actually know their stuff. And unlike other tutoring labs, the WAC lab actually pretty much everybody who's there has to have at least one degree already and has to be like in some sort of writing profession. So they have a higher standard of who they're looking for tutors, so they can be pretty helpful. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my spiel about that. The last day to withdraw, if you're having a class that you're having a really hard time with and you really don't want to fail, because taking that F, taking that 0 to your GPA hurts a lot, guys. Um, Last day to drop is Friday. Some of you may have noticed that our class did get smaller, so yeah. Uh, so last day to drop is Friday, and yeah. That's about what I have as far as those kind of stuff. They've also been trying to push Minimester for winter. If you haven't taken Intro to Mass Comm and you're not doing anything over Christmas, I know a lot of you guys work, so winter is not particularly fun when you also have a job. But if you aren't working and if you have the time to devote a bunch of hours a day to something, um, Intro to Mass Comm was literally probably my least favorite class I ever took, like point blank, and I had to take a lot of bad classes. But yeah, that was probably my least favorite class. So I would have, if I had known that I could have taken it over a winter semester, I would have taken it just to get it done and over with. Yeah. So that's 3 weeks of a class. It's a 16-week class. It is still a 16-week class. It's just condensed down into 3 weeks. So where you would normally have like 3 hours a week that you have to spend on a class, or at least 3 hours of lecture for a class. When you do half semesters, so when you do the mini mesters, that's an 8-week course. That's 6 hours a week. And then when you cut that even further, we're talking it's closer to 10 hours a week. But you get it done and over with. So it's up to you whether you want to try that or not. Yeah. Spring registration did start. It started yesterday for those who were military veterans, currently active military, or I think it started for people who also have 46 plus hours. But yeah. So that's happening. If you want to get into Game Sim, it's not me to message. It's not me to email. Email Vicky. I can't do it. She has to do it. Okay, so with that all said, what are we talking about today? We are talking about shaders and materials. Woo! And lighting. Which, for the artist side of everybody, is probably their favorite thing. For the programmers, it can be a lot of fun because holy crap, shaders are all about doing programming. We do now have a shader graph, which makes it easier to kind of visually create shaders like in Maya and Max, but it still comes down to like the nitty gritty of you having to program things. I'm not going to show you guys how to program a shader. I'm not going to even really go over shaders. I just want you to know they exist. If you look in the asset store, Unity asset store, there are tons of them for you. Or there are tons in here that you could use if you really wanted to, and they're under, where the heck are they? Under visual effects nowadays? Yeah. So you can come in here and you can say, okay, well, I want a shader. Some of them will be paid. You can actually come over here to pricing and say, hey, I want free assets. And they'll show you shaders. Now, shaders can have a lot to do with anything. They can do water, they can do all sorts of things. You know, just glowing around edges, shadow mask. Depending on what you want to do, depends on what you want a shader to be. And a shader just basically programmatically tells your graphics card, you know, how do I actually want this to show? So maybe you want things to be a toon shade where you've got like the hard cell shading for the shadows, instead of doing like realistic shading. So you've got to tell your computer actually how to render that or how to talk to that. So that's where shaders are things that are really helpful for that. So yeah. And there's some pre-built in, and we'll talk about that, but I just wanted to let you guys know it is not in any way, shape, or form cheating or a problem if you go and find a shader that somebody else has written. Or, you know, I even inside of this document, I link a bunch of different places where you can look at how shader graph and how different shaders work. Shaders are really cool, but literally they get really, really technical. And there's also, in other schools, in other places, you spend 2 semesters learning about shaders. Like, there's so much. In the same way, what we're doing today, this idea of materials and lighting and shading and texturing, like, 1, we have a full class for that. 2, a lot of other colleges and a lot of 4-year institutions that kind of do the same thing that we're doing, they literally break it down so that each of those are a semester or a year's worth of, like, you take lighting 1 and you take lighting 2. So just note that's a thing. Yeah, but so we're going to talk about materials and shaders and stuff like that, which is, it's fun. If you guys have had lighting, shading, and texturing already, a lot of this is going to seem really similar, and you're going to be like, I already know how to do this. So it's going to be a little bit of a review. But once we get to lighting, there's going to be some interesting things that you guys probably haven't really looked at with lighting, shading, and texturing. I'm not 100% sure how he teaches it nowadays. Because depending on who teaches lighting, shading, and texturing has always depended on, like, how it was taught or what programming it gets taught in or things like that, or whether it's taught more towards efficiency in a game engine or if it's taught more towards just making things look pretty. And because we're in a gaming class, we got to talk about efficiency. So that's going to be one of the big differences. We'll talk about light probes, which are awful and wonderful, but awful. Yeah. Giant grids of gross. So, textures. What did I write here? So, inside of Unity, there is a standard shader. So basically every material, everything that's on your standard models comes in with a standard shader. For them, their standard shaders are going to be metallic smoothness, which is going to be the same kind of workflow as a metallic roughness. For those of you who've taken lighting, shading, and texturing, you've probably talked about like this idea of glossy specular versus metallic roughness. It's also one of the big differences between Unreal and Unity as to which one they default to. That being said, Unity will or can default. You can switch it over to specular. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. But anyways, so transparency, however, works a little funky. I actually have one of these that I can show you. If we take this character model, and it decides to do its thing, and everything else. So right now this is set up, this cape is technically transparent, or technically has like transparency. I've turned it off because, and anything that's black is where the transparency is. And the reason why I've turned it off is because sometimes what you get with Unity, and sometimes it fixes itself when you build and sometimes it doesn't, is if we come into this and we switch this over to transparent, you're gonna see, one, some things are not transparent, but two, we also have like this idea that it's showing through her legs, and yeah, there's some funky things that are going on. And this may be because it's not actually built into the albedo channel, and I didn't build it into the albedo channel, which is also a possibility. But in general, you kind of sometimes get this funky thing going on with transparency. So the best option is to always kind of, if you can, well, it's not really the best option, but it's a good workaround option. Whatever you want to have transparency, you separate it onto its own material level. So it's only one thing. Because like right now we even have like the hair is like transparent at the tips, and if I remember right, for whatever reason her breastplate ends up like weird and transparent. No? Okay. There are other things that end up weird and transparent. But maybe it's a little, yeah, it's the little leg things in the loincloth area and stuff like that. So not exactly what we want. And sometimes you can kind of fix it when you do different versions of the transparency, but not always. And we'll talk about those different things in a minute. I just wanted to show you that that's a thing. Okay, so back over to the document, because we're going to talk about getting textures ready. And again, those of y'all who have taken modeling classes, those of y'all who have taken animation have probably all heard this spiel and are like, okay, what's new? So textures can be for Unity in just about any format. That being said, the golden rule, avoid JPEGs. Use something lossless like a PNG or a Targa. Those are the two big ones that everybody tends to navigate or gravitate towards. So, yeah. Try to keep your textures to a power of 2. That's, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, 8192, etc., etc., etc. And that has to do all the way down with programming on this idea that binary works in two values, zeros and ones. So yeah, it's less compression and less crunch. So yeah. So keep them square. If your software can mipmap, if whatever you're doing can mipmap it. Those of you who have used Substance Painter, and I'll show you in Substance Painter in a minute, mipmapping is kind of automatic unless you tell it to not mipmap, so that's great. Those of you who are just hand drawing, so mipmapping looks like this giant, crazy, scary thing. Again, I'm going to tell you, these are not perfect maps, these are not exactly the greatest maps, but this will show you how mipmapping works, like this idea that you have this weird kind of smooshy thing going on. And the reason why this is helpful is because your texture and your mesh actually have two different okay, so like we're talking about a character controller. Basically your character controller gets applied to both your mesh and your texture, and they technically move independent of each other. So the issue is that occasionally there's a miscommunication and they move in different directions. By mipmapping, if your texture accidentally slides or goes a different way than your mesh, then you don't really notice it because you have that mipmapping. However, if you don't have mipmapping, it turns bright pink or bright teal, depending on the program. So mipmapping is your best friend. if you are not mip mapping, if you are just hand drawing your texture, you're going to want to bleed it out. So where is my open with? Because you're going to default to something stupid. So like, this is for the skin. And this is like a super simplistic version because, you know, it's all blue, so we all stretch it out. But you may also do something like, this is not mip mapped. This is a bad idea. This idea that this is like really close. This, however, would be fine. This would be fine. You know, these would be okay. This is okay. It should be a little bit further than that, but it is what it is. So mip mapping is your friend, or bleeding things out the edges. They're your friends. So, with that all said, materials are really easy. Before I talk about setting up materials, I have something in here that I don't talk about, which is importing things. So, all of the furniture that you gave, okay, I won't say all of it, but a majority of it has textures attached, or has textures and materials inside of it. To do that, to like unpack them, because in FBX you can pack your materials and stuff with. Oh, I shut that. So once that opens, I'll show you how to like get them out. It's the same way using the game exporter or using the export button. It's easy. But once you actually have your model, what you could do inside of here is you go to your character model, you look inside your inspector. As soon as it does its thing, what it's doing, I don't know. Oh, it's repainting. Okay, cool. Not really helpful, but okay. And over in your materials, you're going to have these two buttons that say, hey, extract the textures and extract the materials. And you're going to want to click both of them. Now, they may not come in attached, so you may have to actually drag things in and like actually reallocate for your textures. So like rebuild your shader or rebuild your material. But as you can see, I've already got these mapped. So I have the blue skin, which just takes the albedo, which is your color channel. And yeah, so that's how that works. Because that's really important. Now, are we actually going to open? We're probably not going to open today. With all that said, let's look at, before I show you how to do, like, how to take things from Substance Painter, let's do just, like, a normal cube. So, to create a shader, to create a material, my opinion, or my favorite friend, is to have a material folder and to have a texture folder. Depending on what studio or what group you work with, sometimes they want to have them all together in the same thing. Sometimes they want them separate. It just depends. I like having them separate because it's easier for me to see everything. So, you know, right click, create, and we're going to go to material, which is right here. And this is where you can actually create your shaders, if you're going to create a shader. But materials. And it'll pop up this. And this looks really daunting on first blush, unless you know what all these words mean. And so albedo is just your color. That's your base, like it says, RGB and A. So those are your RGB and A channels. Wow, it actually decided to pop up in the middle of talking to something else. Cool. Go Maya. Okay. So a lot of this is going to be treated as far as Unity's standard shader. It's going to look a lot like what you guys are used to if you've used Substance Painter, or what you're used to if you've used any kind of Arnold material, or the Fongs, or the Lamberts. But when it comes to exporting, again, your best friend is to have everything kind of together that can be. You can export a rig on top of this, etc., etc., etc. And then you just come to File. My favorite is the game exporter because it has a bunch of extra options in it. So you can tell it to export just the selection. You can tell it to move it to the origin, which is really helpful because sometimes, even if you freeze the transform, Unity still takes the old data, and yeah. So, and then the big and important thing is to embed media. As long as you have that embed media clicked, you have access to your textures and your materials. You just have to unpack them. And then you just tell it where to go and you export it. So that's super easy. If you don't want to, like, say you're texturing your model inside of Substance Painter, you don't want to import, I mean, you can, but you don't technically have to import your materials or your textures, so you can unclick that embed media, because Substance Painter actually has a Unity export for you. So it has things built for you, because we're going to see in a minute what a couple issues are. So we talk about this idea that we've got an albedo, which is a color map. Metallic smoothness, metallic literally says exactly what it is. How metallic is it? Is it shiny? Is it not shiny? And how smooth? Now there's slight differences between those, and it has to do with like surface texture and the way things subscatter. For the purposes of this class, I'm just gonna say go hog wild and test them out and see what you like. As far as your smoothness goes, you actually have a source option. So you can say take it from your albedo channel or take it from your metallic channel, which are going to be two separate kind of things that you push in. You got normal mapping, which look like funky 1970s, 1980s Technicolor Dreamcoats. Teals and pinks and greens and things like that. That's a normal map. And that just fakes depth. That's what it does. Basically, it says, hey, when you're collecting light data, these are the things that are going to be high, these are the things that are going to be low, these are the things that need to do that. And basically, your height map does similar things, and for the purpose of this class, they do similar things, because again, they get nitty-gritty, and you have an entire class that goes over this. Occlusion has to do with shadowing. Again, if you guys have taken any of the modeling classes, you've probably talked about ambient occlusion, which is how much something shades itself. And then a detail mask is maybe a new idea for you guys. And a detail mask, all that is it's like, hey, I want to take this one section of this cube and blow it up to a full texture. Like, so to a full, if your texture maps are like 1024 by 1024, you may want just one part of it to also have the same amount of detail as that whole, like the whole object. So then you create a whole nother set and you just apply it to that one side. And that's what all these guys are. And then tiling, again, that should make sense, you know, make things tile. And this is great for if you're wanting to like just stick like a brick tile in, and so you want to just tile it 100 times across things. And emission was the other one I missed. Emission makes things shiny or makes things glow so that it's separate from lighting, basically. And yeah, so that's kind of like a really quick run through of these. But if we come in here, we can see we've got two options. We have this right here, which we can actually put in an image, but we also have a color picker. So they work together as well as independently. So if we wanted to do a red, and I'm going to go ahead and shove this on the cube so that we can actually see what it's doing. So we have a red cube, and right now it's not shiny, it's not reflective, it's not metallic or anything. However, if we come here and we run this metallic up, you're going to see it gets darker, and that has to do with the fact that it's because it doesn't have enough light to reflect off of it. But you can see how shiny it gets when you kind of like rotate it. And we also have this thing right now where our lighting is turned off, so it's that one right there. If we turn it back on, it'll start like freaking out. Maybe. Or it won't let me turn it on. Okay, cool. Lighting. Auto generate. It'll start thinking. So you're gonna see we have a cube, but it still doesn't really look quite right because it's still not shiny enough. Like, and you'll see a little standard up here. So we then have to like talk about how we want our smoothness to work. So do we want it to be fully smooth, not smooth, etc., etc.? And you're gonna start seeing where we can get like super shiny or super not shiny. So like we can now see that horizon line inside of that cube because it's super metallic and super shiny. It almost looks like it's transparent, but we don't see the cube, so we know it's not. Or I mean the sphere. So that's like the really easy way to do that. I mean, no muss, no fuss, everything's great. So you can just mess with colors like that if you want, or you could say take what do I have? This guy, and this will show you. So this is this image. So it's a black background with white on it. It's for lighting, for us to talk about with lighting. But you can see where it's now, it's applied that, but maybe, and it's applied the color on top of that. So if we actually switch this back over to white, we're going to see it how it originally is. And right now, because it's so shiny, if it's white, it's going to reflect every color. If it's black, it won't reflect any colors. And then you can also come down here and we can say, hey, maybe I want the tiling to be different. So this is a great, easy way to add bricks or grass or ground or whatever you need. So you can see we start tiling. Things are great. Things are awesome. I won't start singing the ghost song. So yeah. No, it's not. I mean, it's close, but it was for a summoning circle for a spooky game. But yeah, it took some inspiration from Gallifreyan, so yeah, not off topic at all. Yeah. So, and we'll see it a little bit better. Originally it was from the same game that like the little wizard guy that I showed you in the character controller is. And then it got used for a spooky house game, and now it gets used for all sorts of other things. It's just my all-around fun thing. So yeah. So that's how you could do something like that. Now, if we wanted to say, let's look at the other shaders while I'm talking or while I'm thinking about it. So if you open up this shader, there are a ton of them. And again, like I said, if you work better in Specular, or if you forgot to switch things over from Specular, there is a Specular setup. And then there's an Autodesk Interactive, which is supposed to work with Autodesk really well. I don't know if it does. You've got unlit shaders, which literally means, you know, don't take any light data. You have sprites, you have skyboxes, you have particles, GUI, FX, VR, UI, and if you click into any of these, you're going to get a ton of other things. We're only going to talk about the standard shader because it's good for what we're doing. It really is. I've given you other kind of videos and things to talk about the other ones. We'll talk about skyboxes. That's the other one I guess we will talk about. And that we'll talk about with lighting. Yeah. So there's a bunch in here, but the one we're worried about is going to be standard. And again, if you're used to doing specular instead of roughness, you can switch it over to this one. So yeah, I've used this phrase, this idea of roughness, and you're like, but there is no roughness on here, there's just a smoothness. Unity decided to flip the script, and roughness is basically the opposite of smoothness. So a roughness map will work, sort of. But yeah. So, yeah. Now, what happens if you have a texture set that you really like and you want to use it? In this case, I'm talking about this guy. And this is textures.com. If you guys have not been introduced to textures.com, I'm sorry, because it's wonderful. So textures.com is a free website, generally free, and it's got tons and tons and tons of textures on it. It's got tons and tons of textures when it comes to PBR, but it's also got a bunch of photo textures. And the coolest thing about what they do is if you click into something, you can actually say like, yeah, let's do checkerboard, why not? If you come into here, you can tell it to only show you seamless textures. So if you click only show seamless textures, it's only going to show you things that will seamlessly continue to pattern. So it's really awesome. And all of these are free to use. You can use them in your commercial games. You can use them in your school things. You can use them however you want. The way that they work is that they've got this kind of credit limit here. So every day you get 15 free downloads. And I mean that every day. It's not like every month. It's every day you get 15 free things. Now, that being said, if you come into here, you're going to see you generally can only get like the small or maybe sometimes the medium. And every day they've also got free textures, so if you look for their daily texture, that one generally you can like go up. So you have to pay for bigger things. But especially for your student games or for when you're testing out your game, getting a 512 isn't going to cause any problems. Now, for the PBR materials, which is physically based rendering, they cost a lot of money, or not a lot of money, but they cost a decent amount. But what we can do is we can kind of hack it, and like if we come into here, you're going to see that the compiled material costs 100 or that everything costs 400. But if you come down into here, you can get each of these individual channels. So, and since we're in Unity, and since I've shown you that we've got that kind of thing that we can build it up, we can just take these things from the different channels. Excuse me. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of, you know, a longer way, but so maybe there's something that you really like this one's really cool. I don't know if this one would actually work. Let's see. Actually, I want to see. Dude, we're gonna just go ahead and do them on the small side. And you're gonna see I've now purchased all of these, so it's taking credits out, so I have 10 credits left for the day. And then downloads. I want to. Why is this a button I can never find? Open a new window. These guys. And yes, it would be much better and behoove you to actually change the name on this to be something that would actually make sense. And not be as long. But so once we come back over into Unity and it does its thing, oh, it already did its thing. Cool. We can then say, let's make a new material. Great. Material. Wall edge. We're going to go ahead and just apply this to the cube so that we can see what's happening to it. And now, having lighting on is kind of dangerous because it starts to slow things down. That being said, I'm going to do it anyways. So, we can come over here and we can see we want the wall trim, and we just match things up. So the albedo goes into there, and we can automatically see, okay, that makes sense. It's maybe not lining up like we wanted to, and that's just because of the way that this has been unwrapped, and since I'm not using something that I've unwrapped. So things don't match up quite right, but we can at least see how it's going to work. So we've got our albedo, and it's like, okay, cool, that looks, you know, like something. Now, metallic. So you're going to see that this has a roughness map. It doesn't really have a metallic map. We can shove it in there, and we can see what it's going to do. And you're going to see now it kind of is super shiny. So let's, you know, let's make the smoothness down, and maybe we want to just do that. We can say, let's go to the albedo alpha instead. And so that looks a little bit better. And maybe we want to make this a little bit smoother so that it's a little bit softer. And then our normal map. We just drag the normal map in, and this is where you're going to start seeing magic happen. This is where you start seeing things push in and push out. And that's with no extra modeling. That's just, you know, we're faking that texture. If we come straight up on it, even when you get really close, occasionally it will pop all the way through. You get this really nice kind of texture. And so as far as shaders go, you should just drag it wherever you want to put it as far as where it's going to go in your project. But eventually what you do is when you're actually in your material, your shaders should show up. And if it's not, then it's done weird. Maybe look at their directions because they should have directions somewhere for you. But So once we have this, you're going to see when I popped in this normal map, it says this texture is not marked as a normal map. You want to mark things as normal maps if you can. So you're going to click fix it. And then we'll come down here and we'll add our height map. And you're going to see a slight difference, or maybe a big difference. It depends on how their height data is. But you're going to see that this made it even crisper, even nicer. And then the last one we have is our ambient occlusion. And you're going to see that that kind of added some extra shading. Now, we have all sorts of sliders that we can move too. Like, if we want to make this, like, super crazy and add more height to it, we can do that. If we want to make it less crazy, we can do that. And the same with, if we think that there's too much shading, we can pull some shading off. And you can even do it with your normal map, but generally your normal map you're going to want to stick with one. It just works better. So yeah, so now we kind of have this, and that looks pretty cool, but maybe we don't really like that tint, or we want to change the color. So we can start, you know, actually moving that little color slider. We can move things around. Because we don't have an alpha, it's not going to be a thing. So you don't have to really kind of worry about that, but maybe we want to make it purple or red or pink or whatever. And you can see it's an easy way to kind of add some extra detail. Does that make sense? It's just plug and play. Okay, cool. So how do you get something from Substance Painter over to Unity? If you guys are using the newer Substance Painters, they have a better exporter. If you are using the older Substance Painter, you have to add a couple extra channels. But this is the PBR version of that little barbarian character that you saw that's currently inside of Unity and using less channels. But so this one has shiny and metallic bits. This was kind of, I was showing my Modeling 1 students the idea that, you know, hand painting is awesome, but you can still take your hand painting into Substance Painter and add some extra things to make it a little bit better. Is this something that I would normally model? Probably not, but it was fun. It was cute. Yeah. So if we come into File and you go to Export Textures, which is probably something that you guys have done if you've taken classes that use Substance Painter 100 times, you need to tell it where you want it to go. And in this case, it's on my desktop. It's in Fall 2020. It's in Lighting Shade, that one, Assets, and then Textures. That's where I would put it. So select the folder. And then we need to tell it what output we want. Sketchfab is the one that's like it's like 3D DeviantArt or ArtStation. But if you scroll down, it'll be near the bottom, and it's going to have a bunch of these kind of options for you. Now, Unity 5 is the one that I kind of customized from way back in the day. So to show you how that one is, if you go to Output Template, that's what it's got in it. It's got, or that's not what it's got in it, Unity 5. So it has a height map, an AO, an emission, a normal, a metallic, smoothness, and albedo. Sometimes you have to add a couple of these, and that's like really easy. You just create a new channel and you shove them in here. If you do want help or do need help, ask me or ask Billy. Yeah. So this is great. And then that being said, the new version, you've got these universal render pipeline. These should both work fine with what we're talking about. High def won't. Universal should. So you can change the sizing, you can change everything you want, and then you just tell it to export. And it's going to say, do you want to export everything? Yeah, let me export the things. It's going to think. And this is also going to be a good show of how this actually works, if it works. You're going to see that these are 4096. And we've talked about this before, the fact that Unity has a standard size that it comes in at. So by default, all of these are going to be scaled to a 2048 when we do, or when we look at them, unless we set them to be 4096s. So you're gonna see everything's great, everything's fine. It's like, hey, I couldn't do these because they didn't exist. That's fine. We come back over into, I'm gonna go ahead and close this out because that's gonna help my processor. But if we come back over here and we let it do its thing, and you can change the way things are named, you can change the way things are done. But you're going to see we came in with all of these barbarian, blah, 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 and everything else. So these are the ones that we want. So if we come in and let's go here, let's unhide her. And if we say, hey, let's go ahead and we're going to just go ahead and change this one because we already have it there. So let's grab this albedo. Let's put that there. We're going to grab the metallic smoothness because it's already set up for us, and you're going to already see a little bit of change. And then we're going to grab the normal map, because in this case I didn't make a height map because I didn't feel that it was needed. Now you're not really going to notice much inside of her skin. Maybe a few of the scars have a little bit of deepening. You can see the one right here has a little bit more depth to it. But where you're going to actually start to see things is going to be like this armor piece and that kind of stuff. So, and again, we need to fix the normal map. And again, if you decide that you're like, I do want this to be 4096, but also remember that if you don't need it to be 4096, it doesn't need to be 4096. You can grab whatever you think needs to be bigger, and you can say, hey, yeah, this is going to be a 4096, so just like apply that. And technically, you don't need wrap modes. You can keep it however you want. So all of this stays exactly the same as what we talked about in the 2D world, which is why I kind of skipped over it without even thinking about it. So once we have that one, we can switch over here and change out the thing that's called everything else. And we can put that there. And you can see that that already made a slight change. And then metallic smoothness, we can pop that in there. And you can see automatically that like made a huge change. We now have things that are shiny and things that seem to be doing things. And if we switch this over to cutout, you can see that the cape now has a cutout. And it seems to be working a little bit better than the last time. Like, cutout tends to work a lot better than fade and transparent. And so we've got one more thing. We have our normal map. So if we grab our normal map and we pop it in here, fix now. And so you may be asking, well, why don't I have an occlusion map? And that's because I told it not to. And that's just a personal preference for this kind of thing. However, you can 100% in Substance Painter say, hey, yeah, make an ambient occlusion map just to make it. But now you can see where we can see all these little divots going in. Things look a lot more dynamic. They look a lot more beat up. And that's all because of a normal map. And that's like, honestly, one of my favorite things about normal maps is because they can add so much extra detail, so much extra beat up details to these tips, the edges of the loincloth, making things look more real and worn without you having to actually model all that in. Like, yeah, your high poly models are awesome. Don't get me wrong, if we all had time to high poly model and make it look great, that'd be wonderful. But there's something to be said about the people who can actually sit here and do normal maps really well, because they save you time and effort. So, like, as you can see we now have stitching lines. If we take this off, you can see the big difference here. You can see the fact that, you know, flat versus, is it gonna be that one? That one. Versus how much extra detail that gives. So normal maps, height maps are some of your best friends. Again, don't get me wrong, high poly sculpts are amazing. I love high poly sculpting. But normal maps in the end, and you can actually take a high poly sculpt and bake it into a height map / normal map. but being able to figure out how to do normal mapping without having to do the high poly sculpts is also like a really great thing to do. So, does that make sense? Okay, so what's the difference in the rendering modes as far as transparency? That's fine. I mean, I assume half of you have just like sat yourself into chat and have gone to make lunch or something and gone far away. Yeah. So the difference in the rendering modes. Oh, that's okay. I get it. I get it. Like again, it's recorded, and if you've taken other classes, a lot of this is still similar information. Um, so opaque is the one that you want if everything is hunky-dory, there's no transparency whatsoever. That's the one that's generally going to be the satisfactory one. Cutout is if you have hard lines. So that's why we're using it for this kind of edging. Because we just need a crisp, this is opaque, this is not. Now, what gets into a little funkiness is fade and transparency. So fade, if we switch it over one, you're going to see this is where it gets into some weird kind of things. And transparent is going to do the same thing. And the difference, and you're going to see like around this edging, the difference between them has to do with how they treat reflected light. So transparent is good when you want realistic transparency and retaining all of the lighting effects, all of the glare, all of the reflections at full power. Whereas if you do fade is like if you have a layer in Photoshop and you just take the opacity down. So it takes everything down with it. So it takes that glare, it takes the reflection, it takes the shadows and everything down with it. That's the difference between transparent and fade. Again, the safest one, the easiest one to use is going to be this. However, you can get some really awesome renders with fade and transparency. I use them a lot when I'm doing rendering kind of things. I've used them for in-games, but cutout is still your safest best friend. So, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, is there any question about textures? Any questions about that? Okay, cool. Yeah, if you've taken other classes, they're pretty much the same. They work pretty similar. Shaders, you can mess with these. You can look at them if you really want to. We talked about the nature shader last week when we were looking at terrain. Mobile will help increase mobile performance. UI is UI. You've got VR stuff. Because VR actually has to have certain kind of textures and things like that. Most VR systems actually can't handle normal mapping, or at least 6 months ago they couldn't handle normal mapping and height mapping really well. And like VR chat basically doesn't let you use any of those kind of things. I don't know if they do now. I haven't used them in a while. It could have been more like a year. I could be lying. I've said it before, I'll say it again. VR makes me extremely, extremely sick. So, developing for it and testing it are no bueno. So, you've got particles, which will create kind of standard things. You have FX, which is flares, and yeah. But so the ones that you're basically going to stick with are going to be standard or standard specular setup. There are a bunch of legacy ones, which if you look at tutorials and things, they may talk about legacy shaders. Or you can make your own shader. Yeah. And I gave you links for using the shader graph and how to make your own shaders. I do not expect you to make your own shader. I would be pleasantly surprised if you do, or pleasantly surprised if you use shaders, because again, there are tons of shaders out there for you to use. Generally, you just, if you downloaded it, a lot of times if you go to your package manager, if you let it do its thing and you say my assets, so those are the ones that you've bought, you can find like this is one right here. So, and it'll tell you like this is how you use it. Sometimes it'll tell you this is how you use it. Because I don't 100% remember, but you download it and then you shove it onto things. Some of them you also have to shove things onto your camera. So always make sure to look and see, there should be directions on the page. So like this one for sure, I know you have to put it on the objects that you want to have the outline, but you also have to put it on the camera or put a different portion on the camera to make sure that it actually does what it's supposed to do. Yeah. So, okay. So, let's move into something else. Let's take this character model out. Well, I guess I don't really need to take her out, but I'll hide her. Hide. Nope. Hide. Okay. So, we're going to talk about lighting. And this is the one that probably gets, lighting artists get paid a lot because people often don't want to deal with lights. Like, that's kind of the thing. Lights can be hard to deal with. Lights can be problematic. Let's switch this guy back to... So lights can get problematic. Lights can get... lights can be hard because, especially when it comes to the gaming industry, you have to be able to balance making things look pretty and making things perform well. So some of the things I'm going to show you, I'll talk about, yeah, you could do it this way, but it may not be the best way. For some of you, especially the artists, you may find that Unity is your favorite place to render. A lot of artists like using game engines to render things over using like Maya and Arnold. I don't like Arnold. I can use Arnold. I will use Arnold if I have to, but I would much rather use Unreal or CryEngine or Unity to render images. In fact, when I did my finals and everything for my degree, I did everything inside of Unity, so well, let's go with so when it came to rendering things, I rendered that in Unity, which was not the best render in the world, but making the wagon look nice, it made it look nice. That being said, you will see some slight differences between what, like if you're doing Substance Painter, what Substance Painter is showing you and what Unity actually does show you. So, like, all of this was rendered inside of Unity. So, please note that your game engines, like those of you who are artists and are like, well, I don't want to be a game artist, game engines are so much faster to render in than like waiting for hours and hours on Arnold. Yeah. So I definitely, I like, again, Unreal creates beautiful renders, so does Unity, especially with the new high def pipeline. So does CryEngine. CryEngine, for a while, it fell out of favor as an actual game engine and was just used by artists to create beautiful portfolios. So, note that these are tools that you can use for more than just a game. Maybe you want to make your portfolio into like a walkthrough gallery. That'd be kind of cool. You can use Unity. You could use Unreal. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. Please never think that I'm saying that one is better than the other. This class is Unity based, so that's why we do Unity. Unreal is also really good. So, at different things, to be entirely honest. They both have their ups and downs. But anyways, lighting. So there are actually 3 documents, so we may go over class today. I'm going to try and not, but we'll see. That being said, Thursday's going to be a lab day, so yay. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about. Basically, all I've set up, if you're going to follow along, is going to be a sphere and a cube on a plane. And that's that. So yeah, so this is what we're doing. And by default, we have a sun somewhere. Sometimes you can find it. There it is. We have a sun. And you can see that it's casting shadows. If we actually grab whatever this directional light is, so the first light that comes in, it automatically says, hey, yeah, this is going to be your sun. Thus is why it does a sun. If you rotate it, we've talked about this a little bit further, you can like actually affect what time of day it is and whether it's, which way it projects your shadows. And you're going to see down here in the bottom that it was blue for a little while, and that's because it's rebaking or resetting the lights every time we move this to try and make it match. And that's why it's not the best thing to have your lights going on while you're trying to build things, but as soon as you're done, 100% generate your lights and then turn it off again, and then generate and turn off and generate and turn off. So, and you can see if we rotate back up to the sky, we can, there it is, find wherever that sun is, and we can follow it so you can see how it works with the horizon. And that's pretty cool, and that's really easy. Now, maybe all you need is to change the way that you want your sun to look. Maybe you want it to be more pink. As long as you're not looking up there, that doesn't look so great. But if you're looking down here, cool, we suddenly have, really pink light to this kind of beautiful purple color. And you're going to see that the sky also changes a slightly different color. Not really, but slightly. So that's an easy way to kind of change that. Now, no, that's not what I want to do. Now this uses a directional light, and directional lights actually work the same way here as they do inside of Maya and Max, insofar as it's a light that shines in a single direction and just keeps going in both directions forever. So like right now it's got that kind of cone that cylinder that goes that way. So it means that there's light going that way, no matter where we move it, there's always light going that direction. So that's relatively easy, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about actual lighting. So if you don't already have your lighting tab up, if you go to Windows and you go to you go to rendering and you go to lighting, that'll open it up. And it'll open it in a separate panel. I tend to dock it over here right next to my inspector because I use lighting a lot, or at least turn lighting on and off a lot. So yeah. So if we come inside of here, we've got this this is what the scene is going to do. And there's a ton of things here. And a lot of this has to do with like how many samples and things like that. These can be decreased to give you some better performance, but sometimes that's not good. Sometimes it just doesn't work. You tend to be okay, especially for this class, leaving this alone. These will actually create your light maps for you. So it's this idea of creating kind of like a texture map, only it creates it for the lights. And then we have this thing of this environment. And this is where you're going to spend, especially for this part of the class, the most of your time. To get things set up to look how you want them to. So by default, we have a skybox. It uses the sun source, which is the directional light. And then it says, hey, what do you want the shadow color to be? And that's that shadow that's being cast down there. So we can actually come in here and say, I think I want it to be a different color. And sometimes it'll show up, sometimes it won't actually like make a difference. It just kind of depends. And like, so at this point we're seeing, because we've got so much of that pink, we're not seeing this shadow cast here. But if you look at the bottoms down here, we're seeing a lot more green. So generally if we switch this around, we're going to see a little bit more purple and things like that. So you just kind of have to play with that if that's what you're wanting. So if you want your environmental lighting, and we'll talk about making it a skybox in just a minute, you can say, hey, take the lighting, take like what's actually being affected on this, like the colors and things, take it from the skybox. Or you can say, I want it to be a gradient instead. And in this case, you can see how that kind of affected that. And it's easier to see if we have, let's come back over here and switch our light back over to a light yellow so that we can kind of see this. So if we come back over into here, and then we'll switch this guy back over to we've got a gradient. We can define what we want to do. So maybe we want that to be yellow. We want the horizon to be pink. And we want the ground color to be, I don't know, teal. And you're going to see we've got a little bit of yellow at the top. We've got this pink. And technically we've got a ground color somewhere, probably casting at the bottom. But so that's another easy way to kind of set up how you want your colors to be. And you can see it rotates. Things are great. Wonderful. Awesome. And you can also change how you want your reflections to be. The other option here is a color. So you can just say, yeah, just take this one color and like completely bathe everything in it. Yeah. But so as far as, and inside of your directional light, as far as that goes, you also have the option, you can tell it that the intensity needs to be more or less. It just kind of depends on how you want it. But inside of here, environment, what if we don't like the skybox? Like maybe you've downloaded another skybox, or maybe you're like, you know, when I took Modeling and Rendering 1, we talked about HDRI images, and I want to use one of those real-time maps. Good news! You can. It's not the best idea, because they can be overly taxing on your system, again. But for something small like this, as long as you don't have a lot of other like crazy things, you can. So in the document, I tell you HDRI Haven is like my favorite place to go. It's 100% free. They go up to 16K. If you click over here, yeah, they do ask for donations. If you start using them, throw them $1 or $2. Like, yeah, throw them $1 or $2. So basically, this is their every month they have kind of a goal, and that's how they make this 100% free. And if they go over that, that means they can add extra things. But so they even break it down into like if you want to do things, what you want to do, how you want to do it. If you come over to Asset Store, sure, why not? Okay. So if you come over to the Asset Store and you go to, I think it's Tinder Textures and Materials, you can find sky maps here. So like I said, you can find sky maps, you can find skyboxes, you can find some HDRIs. There's a lot of places to get HDRIs. There's some free ground mats. There's, you know, but yeah, HDR Haven is the one that I tend to like. If you're going for more of a cartoon style, you're probably going to find yourself looking for skyboxes anyways. So sometimes they keep taking things out as to like how they're calling this, but it used to have a skybox, like literally just a skybox thing, but you can also just Google skybox, or instead of here, skybox. I don't care about that, I just want to know about skybox. So, and yeah, you'll find some that are more cartoony than others, and you can use whatever works for you. Or you can build your own. Yeah, or you can build your own. So, I've already downloaded, because Lord knows that sometimes my internet decides that it's going to take 9 years to download things. I already downloaded one, and it's right here. And actually, let's come over here and switch that over to Skybox. So there's a few extra steps that you have to do to make sure that this will actually work. And we're going to see, because I could still get it wrong again. So inside here, you want to make sure that most of this is okay. You want to make sure that it doesn't repeat, so clamp it. And then you need to match whatever size. I think I pulled this in at 4K. So you want to match the size. Like, this one's important to match your size if you can. And when you click apply, why is my image not showing up here? Okay, cool. You should be able to see this. It should all work. Things should look about what it's supposed to. There used to be, I know if you read the document, it's like, there's a lot of steps. It used to be that there were a lot of steps. They kind of changed the way that this works. So those tend to be the only two things you have to do. So now we can come into our materials folder. We can create a new material. We can call it HDRI Skybox. And we're going to come into our shaders and we're going to go to Skybox. And we're going to go to panoramic. Now, we're just going to drag in this guy to here. And you're going to see it works. Now, occasionally you may have to switch it from a 6-frame layout to a 6-frame layout. It just kind of depends on the way that it is. You can change your exposure. You can tint it. You can rotate it. So you can actually kind of see how this is all working. So, and then once that's all done, you know, relatively easy, right? We can come over into our lighting, and where it says default skybox, if you click here, it's going to give you a bunch of options, and that's because you can do a bunch of options. And why is it not right there? And you're going to see, suddenly, we have our skybox. So, you know, kind of cool. Now, if you want to rotate your skybox, again, you have to go back into your material and you have to rotate it here. So maybe I don't know. I liked where we were. I like that view. Now, maybe you don't like this tint and you want to make it, I don't know, scary? That's not scary, but just go with me. It's like when I made cherry Kool-Aid water the other day. So maybe you just want to tint it. Now, once this is all said and done, we want to make sure, and again, exposure is like how much light you're actually letting in. Generally, around 1 or around 0.5 is going to be your best friend. But some skyboxes will come in, some HDRIs will come in as like incredibly bright. Yeah. So, if you don't know what an HDRI is a special image. It's basically a camera image with like infinitesimally more data into it to make sure that the lights are all processing. So you can get some of this kind of light bounce off of it. Technically this light is like coming in here. If we come over here, we can say, hey, environmental reflections taken from the skybox. So we're technically getting, if we made like a super shiny object, we'd get some stuff off of here. Things like that. So it gets kind of cool because you can kind of affect or make things, and you can see this kind of makes it a little bit grayer. It looks like it would look different here than if we say put a green grassy area, which would have more green reflections and yellow reflections. So that being said, there are some issues. You may have noticed that when we rotated this HDRI, that it didn't actually change how our shadows were cast. Which it should, right? Because, you know, if we're posting here, we've got that light coming in from the windows. Like, why are these shadows not changing? That's because your HDRI, or at least your Skybox HDRI, doesn't actually affect that. They only impart ambient, so like the stuff that's kind of just chilling out, only that shadow and lighting. So the stuff that's like reflected onto here, yes. The stuff that's reflected down to here, no. So the best option to do that is to actually like set up lights that mimic these areas so that you can make sure that you've got the light coming in. So in this case, because we just have a sun, if we had an outdoor area, we would take this sun and we would literally smack it wherever the sun is. So align it so that it looks like it's supposed to. And that's kind of one of their downfalls, to be entirely honest. But yeah. That being said, like I said to begin with, skyboxes are really, really heavy on your system. So you kind of want to avoid them if you can. I mean, they look nice, and if you're making like a real world situation, then yeah, sure. But otherwise, you can make all sorts of other kind of skyboxes. If you create a material, new skybox, and let's switch this guy over to skyboxes. You've got this idea of a procedural skybox, and this will literally take your horizon, the standard skybox, and then you get to actually switch things around. So let's go ahead and switch this over to our new skybox. So now we go back to looking standard, and you can see the difference. You can see how this is now cast blue on the floor instead of that kind of white grayish color we had. And you can also see that the sun's actually doing its thing. So if we come over into our inspector, we can say, hey, how big do you want the sun to be? So let's find where the sun is. There's the sun. So how big do you want the sun to be? So I want it to be ginormous, or I want it to be non-existent. In this case, let's go ahead and make it about that. And sun size convergence, which has to do with like how much bloom it has, for those of you guys who are artists. You can change the atmospheric thickness, so that's kind of like how much fog and everything is sitting in this atmosphere, so how much light and color does it take from your sun. And you can see every time I make these changes, we've got different changes happening to our objects. And you can tint your sky. Again, it tends to start out gray, but maybe we're on an alien world and we want to change it over to have a pink tint. And the reason why it's turning green is because of the way that we have this convergence. Or not this convergence, the atmospheric thickness. So if we take the thickness down, you're going to see we go back over to that pink color. But because we've got maybe a little bit too much thickness, we're going to go to that green color. And then we can tint the ground, which is this area down here. I don't know, let's tint it green. Why not? And you can see this actually tints green. So if we change it over to red, we can make something kind of beautifully alien that imparts all this great lighting and all this great kind of effect that will honestly take a bunch of different models and give them kind of a cohesive look, because you have this extra bit of coloring. So it's kind of cool. Those are your best friend procedural skyboxes. If you have a 6-sided skybox, all that means, it's a cube map, all that means is that you have 6 sides and you basically put your entire scene inside of a cube, and then you project the 6 walls. A lot of the ones that you download will be that way. And if we come in, let's see, skybox, yeah. So the other ones, cube maps and 6-sided, those are the other two that you'll have, and both of those have to do with that. So if you want, there are tons of tutorials out there for how to make your own skyboxes and how to do that kind of things. And yeah, we already talked about environmental lighting. So let's talk about a couple more of these lighting settings in here. And we're going to go to our scene. We're going to go to our scene. What am I doing? Global lighting source. Yeah, it's in our scene, isn't it? So you're going to have this idea of a lighting mode here. Shadow mask tends to work for people. If it doesn't, switch to one of the other ones. Again, you're going to see some things that are deprecated and some things that are progressive. You're also going to see, why is this not coming up like it's supposed to? If you click this new light settings button, by default, you have this idea that real-time global illumination is unclicked. Make sure to keep that unclicked. Real-time is beautiful, and yeah, technically we would love to say every computer can handle real-time lights. The reality is we can't. And so your best bet is to have this thing called baked with mixed. And so what that means is that things that can have shadows that are just going to stay shadowed the same way forever, we can bake that onto a texture map and say, yeah, that's what you want to use. Meanwhile, the things that need to move, we can have them move. So, and again, we've got this idea of shadow masking. So you can also create new lighting settings if you want to keep like this lighting settings and you want to do another lighting setting so that you can switch between light settings. 100% you can do that. And again, a lot of this is kind of nitty gritty. You don't really need to mess with it. The only thing that you may do is going to be down here where we have this kind of light map thing. When you are testing, make this number small. 1024 is pretty okay. When it comes time to build your game, 100% you can make that unit bigger, because you can make it into, because basically what it's saying is, hey, how big do you want me to make that texture map? Do you want me to make it 1024? Do you want me to make it 2048? Etc, etc, etc. So 2048 tends to be okay. 4096 tends to be good. Again, as you make it bigger, it makes the file size exponentially bigger, so just note that that's a thing. You can tell it whether you want that ambient occlusion on it, the directional mode, things like that. But you shouldn't have to really worry too much about this. If you click auto generate, it'll continue to do it and keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it while you're working. However, if you're not, you do have to click this whole generate lighting kind of thing. And it'll generate your lighting. It'll say, hey, I made no light maps because you don't really have any lights. Because we only have this sun, which is not gonna, it's a global light. So it's not gonna create a light map, a baked light. So, and if we come into directional, you can see kind of how it's going to use this based on these guys. Okay, so with that said, we're going to look at the different light types that Unity has. And I'm sorry, this will probably go over because we've got about an hour. But I want to get through everything today so that you guys can have next time to work. So if we come back over here, let's see, Skybox, Spectre, okay, well, that's fine, we should be okay with that. So yeah, that's totally what I wanted to click. Okay, so if we come into the same way that we would make anything else, there's a light button. Woo! Let me ask this question. Who hasn't taken a class that's talked about lighting? Whether that be modeling, rendering, lighting, shading, texturing, probably the Unreal class, some other class. If you haven't, that's fine. So, okay, so most of you have, so these should all be relatively familiar terms. A directional light literally means, hey, I'm a light going in one direction. A point light is literally just a dot. A spotlight creates what you think of as a spotlight. And an area light is an area light just like in Maya and in Max that creates kind of that weird rectangle kind of thing. Um, so, in more technical terms, a directional light, it's a light that all it does is shoot in a direction. It has no origin, it has no end point, it has no start point. It goes forever in both directions. An area light, if we go game object, light, area light, is this little square guy. And actually, we need to turn on the number, or on the auto-generate lighting so that we can see this. It's this little guy who sometimes works well and sometimes does not, and it just kind of depends on what you're doing. And in the inspector, you're gonna see he's baked only, so you can tell it whether it needs to be a disc or a rectangle. You can tell it what kind of color you want it to be. You can give it a range. You can give it an intensity. And again, it's my least favorite light type. I don't think they tend to work well. But you can kind of see where it's giving a little bit of illumination on that corner. I'm not a fan of them. We'll go with it that way. So you can kind of do all of this stuff however you want to do it. We also have our spotlight, which is a spotlight. And if this isn't working, I'm going to scream because I don't know what I did then. Let's see, why aren't you working? That's actually a really good question. Yo, why aren't you working? Okay, there we go. Okay, so spotlights. They work exactly like, you know, a spotlight does. You can tell it to bake it, you can tell it to real time it, you can tell it to mixed. Mixed is always going to be your best friend, because it'll bake what it needs to and it'll not bake what it needs to not. So, and then a point light is just a point light. It's just a single point, and then it creates, you know, how much intensity do I have, how much range do I have, so you can get really fine points. These are great for if you're trying to make something like illuminate inside of a lamp, or add some extra color to like a fire, or some extra light to a fire. And you can see some of these are kind of like lighting up like they're supposed to, some of them are not. Or, like I said, if you want to glow underneath things, it's a great way to put inside of something and like to make it glow on the floor. So, yeah, that's kind of... I know this seems like really simplified, but that's kind of the extent of how lighting works. Now, you can draw halos, which will also create an extra kind of thing around. It'll make your light more dynamic. So if we take and we make this intensity down, you're going to automatically see it. Or if we take the halo off, you won't. And those work with all sorts of other things. Again, mixed is going to be your best friend. Shadow type, that all depends on what you're wanting to cast. If you want to cast a soft shadow, so the best one, yeah, if you want to cast like a soft shadow, let's get this guy going that way. If you want to cast, you can cast a soft shadow, which will make things really nice. You can cast a hard shadow, which will give you like this really hard edge, and maybe that's what you're going for. Or you can cast no shadow, if you just want to impart the light data, but not impart anything else. Now, some of you have probably been looking and been like, there's this thing that says cookie. What the heck is a cookie? The easiest way to show a cookie is gonna be to do a spotlight. It's pointing down. And then let's take its range. Let's take its intensity. Why are you not working now? Okay. Okay, so we have this light here. Now, maybe we wanted to, you know, I don't know, show the bat symbol. In this case, we're not going to show the bat symbol. We're going to show, if you click here, you have some options. And by default, we kind of use this one. But, let's say we want that. Cookie texture for spotlight should be set to clamp. Oh, yeah. If we come over to our images, textures, and we set this guy to clamp. Apply. Where did you go? So it should be showing up, and why it's not showing up, it could be any number of things, to be entirely honest. Oh, why is it doing that? Why are you doing that? Okay, so I'm not entirely sure why that halo's not, or why that summoning circle's not working. But the other thing you can do is you can actually take textures and you can also do it, but why is that not working? Clamp. Why are you not working? You should be showing up without a problem. Huh. Okay. Why are you not working? That should be working, and I'm not 100% sure why it's not. Because basically... Also, why is it... Did I flip it the wrong way? You're not working. Okay, so I have no idea why this isn't working, because literally it's just drag and drop, or it should be. I could have flipped the colors, so it may need to be white on the side that's not going to show and black on the side that's going to show, which is a possibility. But I'm not going to spend too much time on it, because, yeah, they're really cool. If you talk about cookies, Unity, or let's go with Light Cookies Unity. If you come in here, they've actually got a docs. How do you make it? Oh, that's what it is. It's because I didn't do it correctly. Yeah, you've got an alpha from Grayscale it. So if we come back over here. Wow. I literally just did this like 2 days ago, and I don't remember why, or I can't figure out how I completely managed to space on this. You should work now. Yes? No? No? Okay, cool. Oh, because it's not saved as a grayscale image. So, yeah. There we go. There we go. I promise. Like, literally, I just did this and I don't 100% understand how I completely managed to forget how to do that. So now you can see, and you can see this isn't true black. So we're getting a little bit of that, like, rectangle. So make sure that you're using true black for things that you don't want. But yeah, now we're projecting this wonderful thing on the floor. Yeah. So it's cool. You can use that kind of thing. You can also use, like I said, if we switch this over to, actually, let's do this one. No, let's do this one because that's the one I know for sure we did. And then if we switch again from grayscale, apply. No, we're not going to show up. Okay, cool. You're going to start seeing, like, you can see that bit of craggly there. And what's cool and a great way to use kind of these kinds of things, especially with area lights as well as spotlights, is that you can start projecting things like waves and stuff like that on the walls, which makes life really kind of cool. So it's just one of those things that, again, I'm not expecting you to put a cookie in. I'm not expecting you to do that kind of thing. You can also use it for like a flashlight and things like that. But it is a cool way to kind of add some extra emphasis to your lights and stuff like that. So wow, that shouldn't have taken me that long. Now when we had the wizard, let me actually grab him. 20, he should be in... Where did I put him? There? Comes no. House. Okay, where did I put that then? I'm sorry. I thought I prepped all this stuff and then apparently I didn't. Downloads. Oh, did I delete you? Probably. Oh, okay, cool. So, if you remember, we had this wizard guy, and he's got that kind of weird thing going on in his hat, where you see these weird kind of edges, and we know that that should be solid. Like, realistically, that should all be solid. Like, so should that bottom portion down there. There's some pieces that are kind of doing some funky things. So, how do we fix it? Now, we know that the actual light that's actually causing problems is going to be this guy. And to fix kind of how that's looking, it's all inside of this kind of the strength, the bias, the normal, the near plane. And you may see a few changes if you kind of switch over to hard or soft, depending. But generally, the way to get rid of it is to figure out either the normal bias, and you can see as we make that bigger, it's actually making it worse. So we want that to be smaller. But sometimes you can just fix it by using your bias. Now the bias is how close to the object do we see it. The normal bias, again, sometimes you need to make it smaller, sometimes you need to make it bigger, sometimes it'll be multiple things that you're going to have to do and fix to actually get it to like work like it's supposed to. And it's just going to be a lot of trial and error to get these things to look like you need them to if you're going to use all these shadows. So now you can see we've got a better shadow. Yeah. Okay, so are there any questions about lighting like that? Or lighting currently? Okay, so we got one more document to go through, and this one is the one that's probably the weirdest, and it's the thing that you haven't seen in, like, Maya or Max. So, we have these things called light probes. And if we look over here inside of this document, I don't have this project pulled up. There are these little yellow dots that have these lines that connect them. And basically what they say is, hey, any light that's baked or any light that's happening, how much influence do these things have on them? And it samples the data from the lines between them, the lines connecting them, and it says, yeah, take light from here, take light from here, take light from here. It also works with reflections. And so, this is a first floor. This is a second floor. This is an extreme version of it. Again, the more there are of these, the more data you get, but the heavier it is and the harder it is to process. So, like, this was for specifically, this is the Borderlands scene that you saw. This was specifically for rendering things. So, of course, I can have as many of them as I want. But for a game, this is for a game. This is an actual game. Yeah. So, light probes allow for you to use mixed lighting. And the reason why it does that is that it allows for you to have baked lighting, but then it also allows for the things that aren't going to use baked lighting to be like, yo, yeah, okay, I need to take light from that, or I need to take light from that, or I need to take light from that. So, what do I mean by that? Well, if you have an object and you tell it it's going to be static, that says my shadow is always going to be here. Whereas if you say, you know, let's see, let's make these guys static. So, and you're going to see it's going to say, hey, I'm going to take all this time to do this stuff. And you're going to see it's going to automatically bake the lights, kind of. And then if we come over here, we're going to start seeing baked light maps. And so now that these are baked, if we actually wanted to move them, it's moving with the shadow, but if we were to say and turn the lighting off and just keep our not to auto generate if we move. So now this is baked and it's not moving anywhere. It's baked. Come on, guys. Once things are baked, literally it means that if this guy moves, this shadow stays where it's supposed to be. So that shadow should be staying alone. It shouldn't actually be moving like it is. And that could just be the way that the lighting is working now. But, so it's kind of a difference between the two that way. So, whereas this guy can, like, forever move around without a problem. But this guy will always, well, and it kind of is baking the shadow insofar as you can see it's not, the shadow itself isn't moving, this isn't actually adjusting to the lights. That's kind of what's happening. So we know that we would want, if we moved this ball, we would want it to, like, the shadow to kind of move to match where the sun is coming from. But as it is, like, it's not. So, boo. So that's kind of what that means. Whereas this guy, because we haven't baked his shadow, he'll stretch and move his shadow depending on where he is, depending on what he's doing, depending on how close he gets to things, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the big difference. So if something is never going to move, mark it as static. If something has to move, you don't have to mark it as static. And that's kind of going to be the big thing. Now, there's a few kind of tips and tricks inside of here. So, as far as shadow settings go, if you go to edit and then project settings, and it decides it's going to actually open and not freak out. Okay, cool. Then we can come over to quality if it still exists in the same place. Of course, yeah, it does. Okay, cool. And you can tell it, hey, what pipeline you want to use, but also you can tell it whether you want to like change your shadows or how you want to change your shadows. And you can tell it, hey, only make these hard shadows, only make these soft shadows, that kind of stuff. But you can also come into your player preset here. And remember, player isn't talking about the character moving around. It's talking about the thing that is playing the game. So, like, the window that pops up. And if you come down into this other settings down here, it's going to be... you're going to find where it says gamma versus linear, which may or may not be easy to find because, yeah. Your colors, there we go. Gamma versus linear. If you're going for realistic colors, switch it over to linear. If you don't really care or you don't see a difference, gamma is fine. So just as a hint, that's there. Again, this is in the documentation, so yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's the other one. In edit, project settings, and then in your shadow, quality, shadow, make sure that this is set at distance shadow mark, or shadow mask. It'll make your life better. Or no, just change it to shadow mask. I'm lying. Just change it to shadow mask. It'll make your life better. It'll make it better. That will bake your shadows in place. So once that's like that, that's when, you know, these guys, when they're baked, if we come back over to lighting, auto generate, or not auto generate, but you'll see some issues with lighting right away. But technically these guys are being baked now. So yeah, so that's kind of be your thing. At least they should be generate lighting. So yeah, so kind of the issue is that anytime you have an object, and you can see that's one of the ways that we can for sure make sure that it's baking, is the fact that now there is no shadow on top of it, or no light, no change in the color. So you may have to do some funky things with shadows to get it to actually do what you want it to. The tutorial has kind of a better option for how to talk about how to do this. But I'm just going to run you through it. Again, this document is here for you guys. Walk through it. I walk through it relatively smarter in the document than I am right now. And yeah, so one of the other problems that you'll notice when you bake things is that you don't get any light bounce. So we won't get any kind of like this cool color or this kind of, if we have a color bouncing off of the floor, it's no longer imparting that kind of purple color to it. And that has to do with the fact that that's actually caused by global illumination. So it's also the idea that if we move the cube to a shaded area, that it actually gets shaded. And again, we can fix, and that's global illumination. And because we've baked everything, we don't have any global illumination, and life is sad. So we can actually fix all of that by using light probes. So, again, there are 8 million different ways to put light probes in, but if you come to Game Object, and you go to Light, and you go to Light Probe Group, you're going to get your first light probe group. Yay! And it's this funky little cube guy. And the number one rule for light probes is to always make sure that they're 100% inside whatever you're doing. So like if we had walls, we want to make sure that they're inside those walls. If you cut this through the floor, bad things happen. Like it doesn't register the light correctly. It registers the light outside of your area. So if yeah, and I highly suggest for this part especially to turn your auto generate lighting off, because again this can be very taxing to your system. So you know, maybe we just want to put one in each of these corners so that it will draw all this light. But that's, again, not the best option in the world. So we're going to move this over here. Move this back here. And again, this is like an oversimplified. There's a better visual version of it in the written version. You can highlight... Well, okay, first you have to actually tell it. You want to edit the light group. And it's got these buttons for add, probing, delete, etc, etc, etc. Duplicate selected. You can highlight, they'll change blue. And if you press the Control D, so just like you duplicate everything else, it will pull them out for you. And the big point is to have your lighting, or have these probes as high as your character can go, or as high as you need lighting to go. Anything that's moving. So in this case, if our character's just going to move left and right, it's not going to move up and down, then we can keep this pretty low to the ground. And then Control D, Control D. And yeah, maybe you've got like a funky shape, so you need to move these 100%. You can just grab and duplicate just like one section, or you can say move just this guy out this way, and you're gonna see it changes how the lines work. It says, okay, how do I actually connect everything to be connected? So once you kind of have your light group together like that, it's as simple as saying, hey, yeah, I want you to just kind of generate the lights and let it do its thing. And at this point, it's a matter of testing and seeing whether everything is looking right, if you need to move your probes left or right or up or down, exactly how you need to move them. So now that we're here, if we grab our cube, we should start seeing, no, because auto generate's not on. We should start seeing, yeah, that even though this guy is static and baked, he's getting some shadow on him. And occasionally illumination will cause this kind of problem, where it will completely just like crash half the stuff. So does that kind of make sense? I ran through that really quick, and I don't know whether that makes sense. Okay, so light probes are good. Have light probes in. Light probes mean that mixed illumination works, so that things that were static, yeah, they're still static, but if something like, so if we have our character who, and you can see it's telling you this is the light group that matches him. So if our character decides to walk over here, he actually correctly creates shadows on things. And what things are actually going to cast shadows on him. So everything that doesn't move, set it to static. Anything that has to move doesn't need to be static. And light probes will take care of everything for you. Like, that's kind of the crux of everything. Light probes will take care of everything. Now, what happens if you want things to be reflective? Like, and things are moving, or things aren't moving? This is where reflection probes come into handy, helpful. So to do this, let's go ahead and we're going to make this guy big. And we're gonna come over to I'm gonna give it a little bit of a blue color. I'm gonna make it shiny. I'm gonna make it shiny. Come on. Bake faster. So, reflection probes will reflect the things that are static. Because, like, right now, you're looking at this and it's like, that's not actually, like, reflecting the sphere. It's not reflecting anything. So we want it to reflect this guy. Right? Like, that makes sense? Does that make sense to everybody? We want it, yeah, we want it to reflect the sphere. We want reflections to happen. And we're not getting reflections happening. So, all we're getting reflection-wise is the horizon. To fix that, we have to add a reflection probe. So, to do that, you go to Light, Reflection Probe. Wow, handy, right? So, this reflection probe says, where do I want to start reflecting things from? And you're going to automatically see that it's starting to think about things. And if we turn this, we should be automatically seeing things. And you're going to say, okay, so, you know, what do I want this reflection probe to actually be able to reflect? Sometimes it won't show objects, sometimes it'll show other things. And it's going to say, okay, so you can see how this is moving. In this cube right here, this cube shows what our reflection area is, and you can sort of edit it, but you can also tell it, like, you can also tell it what kind of time you want it to be, whether you want it to be a real time or not. So yeah, you can change the box size here, you can change the projection, things like that, the importance, the intensity. So there's a good chance that you're going to have multiples of these in a thing if you need things to actually be shiny. So if we say here is we want the reflection, and you can see the sphere is actually starting to reflect. The sphere has a reflection here. And that's because it's actually reflecting itself. It's taking this data right here and it's applying it to here. Whereas if we make the box size smaller, so that we take the sphere out, you can see that it no longer reflects itself. And you can actually kind of see what it's going to talk about the reflections inside of here. You can see that the wizard isn't included, and that's because non-static objects are not included in the reflection probes. But the two objects that are, you can actually see them being, or having the reflections inside of them. So, again, we want to make sure, just like with the reflection, or with the reflection, with the light probes, you want to make sure that the bounding box doesn't actually clip through the floor, because otherwise it reflects the wrong stuff. You just want it to reflect, you know, what's in the room. And yeah, you're gonna have to worry about, you know, one reflection probe catching another reflection probe, catching another reflection probe. So you kind of have to set them up a little bit weird. You got to figure it out. Sometimes you just need one for an entire room. Sometimes you need multiple. Again, it's going to be, you're going to feel and have to kind of figure it out. And I'm not asking you guys to put reflection probes in your games. I'm just merely showing you that they exist so that if you want to use them, it can be helpful. Now, a lot of times you have to change the clear flag to a color. And that's specifically so that you're not actually reflecting that horizon. Because even if you're inside a room, it will reflect the horizon just because of the way that skyboxes are. And you can tell it, you know, what you want. And you can see here what the reflection probe is actually reflecting and how it's helping to create reflections directly on. Now the problem is right here where you can see it's directly reflecting the sphere back onto itself, which is kind of hilarious, but also not really what we want. And again, that's the same here. You can see the cube being reflected on itself. So sometimes you have to figure out how you want to do this and like how it's going to actually work. Sometimes it means that you take your reflection probe and you move it to the inside of something. And sometimes it's other ways. It just, you have to mess with it. That's kind of, yeah, reflection probes and light probes are all about fiddling and making it work with how you want it to be. And a lot of times, because one of the things, again, we talked about the fact that you can't currently see the wizard in here. And that's because it's a baked type. Now, a lot of times what people do instead, and you can start seeing, like, so now we can see the wizard reflected in here. Is it a good reflection? No, but it's a reflection. And that has to do with some of the resolution issues. So if we switch the resolution up further, you're going to see, you start seeing reflections of things I can't figure out what it's reflecting, but some, it's because the character actually exists, but I just hidden it. Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense now. And then we've got the character, the other character reflecting over here. So sometimes what people do, and sometimes what people like to do, is that they go into their reflection probes and they make two of them. They make one that's specifically for the static objects, and then one that calls out, because you can say, hey, calling mask. And if you want to ignore static stuff, you can actually take and create a mask for static. But yeah, and so now that's how to make your reflections actually work. Because otherwise reflections don't always work on static objects. Okay, so any questions? Okay, if you find yourself in trouble with this, like, and give yourself enough time to bake your lights, give yourself enough time when you're building your game, because lights actually take, like your 2D game, if your 2D game took 10 minutes to build, your 3D game is going to take 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to build. Because lights can be so crazy. So build early and build often. Once you build the first build, it will check and see if lights have changed, and if lights haven't changed, it won't build as much. So your first build will always be bigger than any other build. So just, you know, the tutors can help you with this. They can help you. They understand lighting, or they should understand lighting. They should understand the probes. I exist and am more than happy to help you with this kind of stuff because I do enjoy doing this. I don't do this as often because the guy who is our production dude actually, like, he loves lighting. Like, that's kind of his bread and butter is lighting. So I let him do that more than I do it. But I do it for my own stuff and for other projects and things like that. The documentation is there if I seemed too rambly today. And it does walk you through step by step, as well as has some links for other places to go look at documentation. So, Thursday. Thursday is a lab day. So it is for you guys to work on your projects, especially those of you who have said, yeah, I haven't started yet. Or I'm still ruminating, I'm still thinking on it. Or I'm thinking about changing my idea. At this point, it's time to not be thinking, and it's time to actually be working. That being said, I am planning to, because some of you guys are having problems with hooking up like pickups. So if my character touches this one thing, either, play the end screen, or if my player touches this other thing, add 15 seconds to my timer, or somewhere along the lines have an internal something or other. So with pickups. So my plan is, whether I do it live or I give you guys a recording, I'm not sure yet. It depends on tomorrow. I'm gonna kind of walk through how to do that. And if you guys have any other programming questions, I am more than happy to make a video walking through what your issue is. I can just make one big giant video for all that stuff. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you guys. So during lab time, as always, I exist. I am here. Even if I'm not in the voice chat, I'm here. I'm doing something, possibly. Generally, I'm grading. If I'm being entirely honest, generally I'm grading. But I'm here to help you if you have questions. So please use me, because that for sure is time that is set aside for you guys. So it's set aside for me to help you with. Whereas some of you have found out recently that I'm not as available as I was like a couple months ago, and that's because I've got a couple projects that are ramping up, and a couple other things that are happening. So for sure, class time is the best time to get in touch with me. Now, if we come over here and we can look at the calendar. Just go to the calendar. And you're going to see you have extra credit due tomorrow if you want the extra credit points for testing the game sim game. You do have a quiz due on Thursday. Please do the quiz again. It's due at 2 p.m. And then you have another extra credit assignment that's not, it has a due date in quotation marks of Friday, but it's not due on Friday. It's like this idea of that's kind of, to remind you guys that it exists. So next week we'll be talking about NavMesh and AI. And again, I think if I get through everything, we'll have Thursday as a lab day again. Let's turn this guy off. You'll have Thursday as a lab day again. And then this is Thanksgiving week. This week is Thanksgiving week. I know that 90% of you are 100% not going to even care about class, so are not going to show up. So I'm not going to lecture, but I do have some documentation on Cinemachine and how to use it with the 3D stuff. And that's what that week was meant to be, and that's what that week is devoted towards. But it's 100% all the assignments that are in it are extra credit and stuff like that. And the week after that is going to be a work week. Or no, it's not going to be a work week. It's going to be when your playtests are due. Ooh. So, we're sitting here. Your playtest is due here. You got 3 weeks to have a playtest. And you have 4 weeks before your game is due. So, now, with that, there's a couple things that we need to talk about as far as what you have due for like your final. Okay. So, when it comes to the final version of your game. Oh, the other thing that I will run through on Thursday is because y'all, for whatever reason, seem to have forgotten how to make builds of your games. A lot of you are just turning in just the exe file to me. That does not run. I also don't want all the project files because that takes ever to unzip and download on my system. I just want the builds, which is when you click the build button and put it in a folder, it's that entire folder that comes with it. So it'll have 2 folders, it'll have 2 exes, and it'll have a .dll in it. I need all 5 of those things. Minimally, I need all 5 of those things to be able to run your projects. So I'll walk through that again on Thursday. If you have something that you've submitted, and I've left you comments. I've left comments on everything, basically. If you have something that you've submitted and it didn't submit correctly, and it's closed already, let me know. Just send it to me through Canvas Mail, and I'll check it out that way. But for your final, for your last kind of thing, there's a couple extra things that you're going to do. Yes, you're going to turn in your 3D game, and you're going to have a final presentation. So I need both your project as well as the final game. And that's going to work. The presentations are going to work exactly like they did for midterm, where you have to take a video of it, a video of yourself playing it. Before that, you're going to have this questionnaire. And basically, you're going to answer, did I actually do everything that Patricia told me to do? Did I do everything that the assignment says, and where did I put them? So think of this like a checklist to make sure that your game actually passes or meets all of the requirements. You do have a postmortem again. So that's where you're going to write. You're going to write me a paper. And you can write this before the game is 100% done. So if while you're sitting here waiting for people to playtest, you want to write your postmortem, I'm not going to fault you for that. Again, it needs to be about 2 pages. You do get extra credit if you take it to the WAC Lab, who again are not on campus. They are through the MVC tab. There's a thing in our modules for how to contact them. So yeah, they can help you even if you're trying to get started or trying to organize or do whatever. That's their job. Their job is to do that. So they will also proofread and make sure things are nice. If you guys, anybody who submitted a postmortem, I left comments on that. And if you're looking at the grade and you're going, why did she take points off? The answer is I took points off for grammar and spelling and indentation. So, yeah. I'm not crazy hard when it comes to grading those kinds of things, but, you know, it's an essay. Please make an effort to actually proofread. And then the one that y'all have not seen yet is going to be this thing right here. It says personal course review. It will be an instant 100 when you do it. It will not open. Some of you saw the one from last semester, which I don't know how you found because it shouldn't have been published or even available for y'all. But that one's been deleted. So yeah, y'all really shouldn't have filled it out already anyways, considering it was for the second half of the semester and you filled it out at like midterm. So no. So this is a new one. So basically, it's set up in a quiz format. When you take it, do not panic. Because when you take it, it will like automatically tell you that you get like a really bad score, or it'll tell you whatever. But I'll go in and I'll fudge it. Basically, if you do it, then you get 100 on it. It's going to ask you things like, which tutorial did you find the most useful and think future classes would benefit from? And it's got all of them here for you. Which tutorials did you find the biggest waste of time? Which articles? For both good and bad. And then it's got some short answer questions. And I'm not asking for a lot. These I won't worry about grammar, spelling stuff too much. But it's going to be like, hey, was there anything that was in the wrong order for you that you would have wished you learned earlier? What assignments did you do the best with? What assignments did you not like? Do you feel that the 2D and the 3D as far as the instruction were balanced? What portion of the class did you feel we spent too much time on or too little time on? What was your personal biggest struggle? And if you want to get personal with me, yeah, that's fine. If you feel like, you know, you're like, well, I just had a really tough semester, that's fine to say that too. If you don't want to expound upon that, if you don't want to tell me why you had such a tough semester or why you had such a great semester, I'm okay with that. But I do want to know kind of, and this is an extra 100 points to your major project stuff, so it's the stuff that's weighted the heaviest. So it's a good thing to do this. And then, what would be your one piece of advice for new students to this class? and then anything else that you want to add. So 100% when it opens, please do this. It'll open, I don't know when it'll open. December 1st. So that's after you've read all of your tutorials, after you've done all the tutorials, after you've read all the articles, so that you actually have like a valid opinion. And be honest. I am really honestly saying that. Be brutally honest. Part of the reason why I do this and why I've done it every semester now, for this class especially, is because I want to know what's working and what's not. And I don't know that unless you guys tell me. I know this class is loaded with work, and I'm trying to get better about figuring out what I can pull out and what I can leave in while still keeping the instruction. Like, this semester, y'all have been talking more about the fact that I don't do enough coding, whereas last semester they said I did too much coding. So it's a give and take. I'm trying to find a good balance, and I'm trying to make this course better, and I can't make it better without you guys' input. Okay, so are there any questions about anything? Whether it be related to this class, related to, I don't know, registration, game sim, Thanksgiving, whatever. I think so. I can check. Yeah, I have to click just as many buttons to get places as you guys do, so know that that's a thing. Game scripting, game development. Looks like we don't have game testing next semester. These are the ones that are specifically game. So, interactive storyboarding, intro, level design, design and creation, character sculpting, particles and dynamics, lighting, shading, and texturing, game scripting, game development using C++, game sim, and principles of character animation. Probably Dawn, but we can actually look at it. Dawn. Yeah, Dawn does. If you've had interactive storyboarding, he's generally the one who teaches it. Yeah. So, character sculpting is really chill. I mean, it's a pain in the ass because it's ZBrush. No. So, the way that that's working is it'll be remote desktoping. So they'll give you a login and you'll basically use it off of the school computers. Like, you'll use it from your computer, but on the school computers. Yes, yeah. Well, okay, the remote desktoping, I'm not so sure, actually. But, I'm not actually sure whether that'll work that way. But, it can be done without it. It's definitely not as much fun without it. ZBrush does have a great day. ZBrush does have a slightly cheaper version of itself that you could probably use for the class. But yeah, you can remote desktop to it. Mm-hmm. So it may not. It's gonna depend on whether, like, how their remote desktoping is actually working, as to whether it'll support the hardware that. Okay, so yeah, so there you go. His does, so yours should be fine. Yeah, because the remote desktoping, it depends on how they've got it hooked up as to whether it works with your hardware or whether it works with the hardware that's on theirs. It's weird, but so yeah, if it does, it does. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions? Those of you who are programmers, Game Dev C++ is happening next semester. It didn't happen this semester, so that is important to get into if you are a programmer. Yes, Scott is teaching it. At least I thought it was. Did I totally miss it? Intro, beginning. Scott is teaching it. For sure Scott is teaching it. Scott is also teaching intro. So yeah. Oh, it is in game. I lied. I literally looked straight at it, didn't I? Yeah, game development using C++ is happening. The other one, what is it called? Is not happening. It's there's game dev in C++, and then there's the other one. So, the other one that was supposed to happen this semester, but then they didn't make the class. There wasn't enough people. So yeah. If you're curious as to what I teach game scripting, and I teach this class. And next semester I'll be teaching game sim as well. So, yeah. Okay, so hybrid. They're not really hybrid, because you can only have 5 students in any classroom, really, and in like 202, you can't even have that many. So, the classes that they say are going to meet on campus, they're not. They are, but they're not. It's going to be this idea of like 5 of you can come to campus if you want. So the 5 people that like, or you can sign up if you have to be on campus. And that only works for certain classes. Like, it will not, none of your Saturday classes are allowed to meet on campus. So yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree. Fall. Maybe next fall. Maybe summer. Um, at this point, it won't be this semester. It won't be spring semester. For sure, it won't be spring semester. Um, yeah. Maybe summer. Maybe summer. Like, as is, all the buildings on campus aren't even open for spring. Only some of them will be open. And there's going to be some pretty epic kind of requirements to actually get in the buildings. So, you will have to wear a mask at all times. You'll be given hand sanitizer as you go in, and as you leave, you'll have your temperatures taken. I think at one point they talked about forcing everybody to walk through a UV light, which is supposed to disinfect everything you've got with you. I don't know whether that's ended up being a thing or not. So, yeah. Yeah, they're going to try and make it, and social distancing will be a thing. Your professor won't be able to come and, like, sit next to you. Or at least not supposed to. And yeah, 200, so the big room where level design and stuff usually is, can only have 5 students. That's it. Only 5 people can be in that classroom. So, like, that's how small. We can only have 25% of our class in the classroom at any given time. Yeah, I mean, but that's again going to be up to your professor as to whether they actually, because even some of the ones that say hybrid, they may or may not be fully hybrid. Because hybrid, the ones that say hybrid, especially some of the other professors, that's because they've always said hybrid. Because it's always been kind of work on your own. And they just didn't change it for this coming semester. So, some professors are going to be, some professors aren't. I know Vicky is going to be using, or she's going to try and use like her Thursday days as lab days, so that students can come in, or 5 students can sign up to come in and work. The lab, like the actual lab with the tutors, will be open with an asterisk mark. You're going to have to sign up for appointments. As far as I know, they won't have like the general seating areas that are generally down in the bottom of MLH. Those won't exist, or you won't be able to sit there. because they can't sanitize them fast enough. Okay. Any other questions? Wants, desires, hopes, and dreams that I can help with? Oh look, now all of you know my student ID, or my banner ID. Alright, then that is it. Have a productive week. I will let you guys know tomorrow night. Yeah, I'll be here for that, but, yeah, have a productive week. I will let you know tomorrow night whether I'm going to do a recording or not. Or whether I'm going to do like a live lecture on Thursday. So, but otherwise it is lab time. Please lab. Please work on stuff. And let me know if you need help. So, with that, everybody is dismissed. And I will talk to you guys later.